Welcome to CTG Weekly, a weekly podcast where we talk about whatever we want to in games. This week on the pod, we're just talking about the Game Awards. Let's go. Andre, the season is here for the Game Awards 2022. And today we're going to do some predictions, talk a little bit about the ceremony, the structure.
Yeah, I'm so excited because, as you all know from our friendship in real life, I tend to follow like awards races more than I actually watch like the awards ceremonies.
No, you
but
love
I am
the
really
build-up.
interested.
You love awards.
Well,
Maybe we should talk a bit about this before we get into the awards show. Is our general orientation towards awarding media? Because I think we have a different approach in how we go into this. So, how do you feel about award shows in general?
So I tend to think I've had this discussion about the Oscars with my mom for many years now, where my mom sees like the Oscars as kind of or at least intending to be an unbiased awarding of like excellence in the medium. I tend to view these as political affairs. And so what really interests me is not like, I don't think that these awards are necessarily really like crowning specific games as the best. I think sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. And, you know, we can debate about years where awards hit the nail or like hit the mark or don't. But I think they're a really good indication of how games are received by the jury members who vote on these things, who are, you know, taken from esports outlets, media outlets, jury members selected for accessibility, and some folks who are from like gaming companies as well. So there's like a big mix, and I like these awards as understanding what these people think about games, because realistically what audiences think about games is radically different, right?
Yeah. My thing with award shows is this. I on principle kind of don't believe in them. Like I think you don't need a gold star for the art that you make. Like I really don't. However, the things that I really like, I want them to win awards. I really do. And so I get really invested in this thing that I don't believe in, and I pick a horse, and when the horse I pick inevitably doesn't win, I become belligerent for a decade about the injustices that have transpired, despite not thinking that these are particularly valuable at all. Although it's worth saying, I was listening to a podcast about the Junos, which is like the Canadian Grammys, right? And these awards aren't just nothing. Like typically, like when a music artist gets a win or even a nomination, they tend to have like their best years. Like there's actually like they make more money, they get booked more. And in terms of games and films, it's not only that you get more like a higher profile, that your company's going to bring in more money, but some of these games get canonized as like these are experiences. Like 20 years from now, if you go back in time and want to play something from back in the day, well, you're probably going to gravitate towards something that has this kind of prestige attached to it. In the same way that classic films that we watch, a lot of the times, barring some exceptions, are like Academy Award winners, right? So,
Right.
These aren't meaningless, even though you, like me, may believe that the value of these is kind of completely illusory. They aren't totally.
Well, I'll add to that because I think the Juno parallel is really interesting. One of the things that's been happening with the Game Awards, really for about as long as they've existed, when they were the Spike Game Awards,
Right.
which was like earlier, right when this was on Spike TV, is Jeff Keighley, who runs the awards and organizes them, and also has been like a key figure in like Gamescom and E3 for many years. I think more so where like E3 is really kind of like a consumer electronics expo kind of affair that is more like a trade show. This is where, you know, the pushback has been happening against like the Roger Ebert like games aren't art debate, which is like, if we start awarding them and if we start canonizing them and we start creating like an infrastructure for recognizing excellence, they will become legitimized. And one of the ways that the show has been doing that for many years is inviting people who are inside the movie industry to participate in this show. So some good examples around 2012, around the end of the Spike Awards, they had on Samuel L. Jackson as the host. A couple years later, they had Joel McHale as the host. I think it was either last year or the year prior. The show was opened with like the opening remarks were from Christopher Nolan talking about like the excellence in visual design in the games. And so there's sort of this I think the award's second function is to sort of buttress game excellence as analogous to film excellence, and to say, you know, like a company using an engine properly is kind of the same thing as like a development in Technicolor or Panavision 70 years ago in film, right? We are kind of historically like where games stand relative to their development is kind of where movies were in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And so there
Some
is a lot to talk
somehow
about.
we're still, because of a few
Mhm.
words Ebert said and our general cultural vantage point on games as this like transgressive, not real art thing, still trying to
Yeah,
validate incredible achievements
right.
in storytelling, in a visual splendor. It is staggering. I every time I think about this, I'm just like, what an asinine comment, and even more asinine that there are people who still believe that these things can't be art.
Right.
Like,
Mm.
if piss
So
Christ
maybe
can't exist, games are art. I'm sorry. All right. Anyway,
for people who don't know what that is, look it up. It's an actual art exhibit in Netherlands or Germany. I can't remember
I
right
don't know
now.
the details of piss Christ.
Um, but maybe we should talk about how the ceremony works on like a voting model, and so people can understand how like okay, so these games are nominated, but how are they winning? Like, right? So we don't get to know the full composition of the people voting. From my understanding, the jury panels are composed from media outlets and esports awards outlets, and that's all split between a number of industries. So it's very kind of like the academy, split between many sectors, and votes are tallied in a 90% to 10% fashion. 90% comes from the jury, and 10% comes from public voting, which you can do via the website now, like today, if you still want to vote. I'm pretty sure it's still running. Um, and apparently for this year, voting is like through the roof. So in the first week only, there were 35 million votes submitted, which was an increase in 42% from 2021. And it exceeded like as many votes as there were in the first, I think, 3 weeks or a month of last year's awards. So the awards are three times, four times, no, a double, twice as big as they were last year, which is crazy. And I think we should think about like what games are likely to get crowned this year as prom king and queen.
Yeah,
If we want to
let's
we
do
want to
it.
do that. So, uh, to the surprise of few people, there are three frontrunners right now across categories. So 32 categories. We're not going to talk about all of them today. We're going to talk about some of the bigger ones. And in those, God of War Ragnarok has 10 nominations. So it is the lead by a fair margin. At end, number 2 and 3 are tied in terms of nominations, Elden Ring and Horizon Forbidden West. If you flip that by publisher, so the same way that we think about studios and how many they're shipping, Sony Interactive Entertainment has 20, Annapurna and Nintendo have 11 each. Notable, like people might be asking, what did Annapurna put out that is like so well received right now? Number 4 in the game nomination roster is Stray with 6 nominations. So Stray has gotten a lot of good press and by all intents is a fantastic game. There are many other games and like companies that are nominated, but these three dominate the discussion. And I think even among these three, Forbidden West is, at least my sense is that it is number three, and that really the competition is between Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok in a lot of the big ticket categories. So
Makes sense.
do we want to just start with Game of the Year? Let's
Yeah,
just start with the biggest one first.
why not?
So this one,
Let's do it in the reverse order.
right? So this one, we'll discuss all the nominees for this one, and because I think this is like the catch-all category. So number one, Plague Tale Requiem by Asobo Studio and Focus Entertainment, sequel to the Plague Tale game from a couple years back. My understanding, extremely competent narrative game, really unpleasant to play and to live in that world. And we'll talk about, how pleasant factors into I think this awards. Number two, Elden Ring from Software and Bandai Namco. Number three, God of War Ragnarok by Santa Monica Studio and Sony Interactive Entertainment. Horizon Forbidden West by Guerrilla Games and Sony Interactive Entertainment. Number five, Stray by Blue 12 Studio and Annapurna. And number six is Xenoblade Chronicles 3 by Monolith Soft and Nintendo.
A game I did not get to.
Yeah. So in talking about, of these six games, which one is going to like come out on top? I feel pretty confident in saying that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is just off the board.
I agree.
This is not to be clear, a lot of the statements that we're going to be giving today aren't statements that are like our feelings about the games.
No.
They're statements about our feelings about how people feel about them collectively, and especially in the jury that is voting on these, and how people in the industry are talking about them from what we've seen. And Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a really simple number 6 for me because no one's talking about it.
Yeah, I when I saw this list, I was surprised it was even here. I've heard so little about it in press.
Yeah, good things about it. That it is, the best Xenoblade Chronicles game. That it is a really good RPG, probably the best RPG on the Switch currently of that genre. I don't want to conflate it with like Breath of the Wild or anything, but it just doesn't break into that discussion that the other games are having.
Yeah.
Similarly, I think Stray is sort of a similar boat where there's this sort of unspoken division between longer and shorter games.
Yeah.
And Stray is really classified as like a shorter form game. It's kind of like, we don't have a division between like long and short runtime games, which we do in film. And I just think it's part of a different category.
I do. Well,
together.
Okay. I get this, and I don't necessarily think it's going to win, but I think it's here is one of those. It feels like it's a token nomination because of how different it was, how cute it is. It's providing a vastly different experience than all the other games in this category, right? And right. I do think that it's not impossible. It's close to impossible. But it's not impossible to have one of those statement-making moments, especially right now where there is this push to want to say that games can be a bit different than they have been. Like, not just that they have been. There's always been weird games. There's always been games that aren't just shooting things and collecting resources, right? Like,
right.
This is an opportunity to elevate that as a game of the year. Do I think that's going to happen here? No, but I would probably put this on my number 5 as well. Like, I think that I have the same order as you in likelihood, but I do think there is maybe a small chance, especially in the quote unquote post-pandemic era of like looking for a little bit of something else. Like that desire that we need something different in our media right now because shit is dark. And
Right.
all these other games, Xenoblade Chronicles aside, possibly, given that there's I'm assuming based on the second game in the series, a sword that turns into a large-breasted woman. So I guess that's not dark, but it is, more in the
Uh,
pantheon of gaming. But
Three's
like
dark.
oh, it is dark.
It's very much like Shin Megami Tensei, like the Devil Tuner Saga ones that were
Oh,
like
they went in
really
that
dystopic.
direction. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Stray, I think is an
Three's probably the only
opportunity
happy game.
to, yeah. I'm not even sure it's totally happy, but it's an opportunity to reward something different. And I think that's why
Right.
so many people picked up on the game to begin with, right?
Yeah. So I just think again, all these games are at the top of the crop for this year. I just think it's not breaking into that number one spot really. And I want to say, I'm not like ranking these. I'm going through them like sequentially. I don't think Stray is any better or worse than other games on this list. It's just different. And I think it's a question about like what people are really eager to canonize right now
Yeah, yeah,
as
exactly. Are
like
we ready for that difference? And I'd say we're more primed to be ready for that at this moment with this game than we've been for a while.
yeah.
And, it is a long shot.
Conversely, I think Plague Tale has virtually no shot for exactly the reasons that you just listed. I think
Yeah.
in a year of late pandemic, releasing a game that is about being overrun by swarms of rats in like a bubonic plague fantasy Europe setting, um, I just
I don't see it.
I know that the game has gotten good reviews from people who've played it, but like nobody wants to talk about it. Like nobody wants to devote mental energy to be on this game. And movies have a lot of the same thing happen when we reach like best picture. It's like inspirational movies tend to win and dark, somber, non-inspirational stuff tends to lose out. And it's very rare that you're going to have like a breakthrough hit. And I, I I think really this category is separated between the top of this group and the rest of this group. I
Hmm.
think it's like clear in terms of the public engagement, the critical engagement, and the audience engagement with the idea of these games as important games.
Yeah.
Similarly, Horizon Forbidden West, I think we have a test case for why this game isn't going to win that unfolded in real time, and we can talk about it with Elden Ring. Horizon launched close to Elden Ring, and it was completely subsumed by Elden Ring in its release like
It's an
window.
underdog, though.
It's true, and you know this, so I'm gonna out myself here a bit with this. Is like I think the original game probably should have won more awards than it did when Breath of the Wild was released, and I think a lot of the sentiment around Breath of the Wild carried it over Horizon Zero Dawn at the time. Forbidden West, I don't think is as strong a contender in this year as it was in that year. I do, however, think that it is like uniquely appreciated by designers, especially visual designers. I know have spoken very warmly about how the game looks and how it's built, and a non-negligible factor in its contention for top spot is the public reception to Aloy. Aloy's like design in this game was a big point in like representation of women in games. And so
Mhm.
I there's a world where critics see this list and are like, I want to reward like good writing about women and good representation for women instead of what is on the rest of this list.
Yeah. Also, it being in the top chunk of the list, it is of those three games: Elden Ring, God of War, Ragnarok, and Horizon Forbidden West. It is the most stray out of those three in that its
Yeah.
color palette is not grim. It's very bright. It is overall more optimistic.
Yeah.
And so I think it's actually more well positioned to be the underdog in the way that like Horizon Forbidden West is doing more of what these kinds of games do
Yeah.
with that little soupçon, that crack of pepper that maybe sets it apart stylistically. at a time when
Yeah.
we need a little bit of vibrancy in what we're consuming.
And I to your point, I think with the visual vibrancy is we really are in a power year for underwater or on water installments of things. Like I just saw Wakanda Forever a couple days past. Avatar is on its way. There's a new Aquaman movie. We're just off of an Aquaman movie not that long ago. This game features a lot of it. Like we are really ready for games that are set in different places that are visually vibrant, that have that sort of like strong blue teal color palette, that are set in day.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't think it's going to be the winner, but it is like there is an upset situation where somehow it comes out because of something that I think may in fact happen, and that is in the discussion about Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok, there may be vote split on this. Like I can see a world where these two games are competing for the same kind of voter appreciation.
Yeah.
And we should probably talk about that because I don't think they're exactly the same, but I think they appeal
No.
to a similar kind of consumer at times.
Yeah.
So God of War Ragnarok, if people have listened to CTG the last 2 weeks, we have feelings about it, but the critical reception, like the jury body who is composing 90% of this vote, resoundingly loves this game. Like it seems almost like a foregone conclusion that it is like the current crowd favorite this close to the awards season, right? And that I think has some knock-on effect. There are discussions about like, you know, the story doesn't always land the way that we want it to, the gameplay, but this is still a 94% Metacritic game from the jury voters. From the audience votes, which compose the other 10%, it is lower. And so I think what may in fact happen is that a lot of the audience vote may go to Elden Ring, and a significant portion will be split between the two games, which means I can't actively tell right now if God of War Ragnarok or Elden Ring is coming out on top. And Elden Ring, another phenomenon like God of War Ragnarok at the beginning of the year, right? A game that really feels like something that you cannot ignore if you are in the video game sphere in
It
any way.
Compared to God of War Ragnarok, Elden Ring was everywhere. It was everywhere in
Right.
my feed. Like in all of my feeds, all places that I live on the internet. Elden Ring was everywhere. It was memed nonstop. And I was actually surprised reflecting on this, as there was a lot less of that with Ragnarok, although there may be maybe something to say about the fact that Ragnarok came out as Twitter was imploding, which severely limited some of where that would be. But I feel
Yeah.
like the reception was different, and I think it leans a bit in favor of Elden Ring, at least in my circles.
Yeah. I one of the things to talk about with that is like developer reception, because this jury does have some developers on it as well, which
Yeah.
really seems to be. I think the dev reception to Elden Ring was a bit more muted than the fan reception was, and Elden Ring is a much longer game, right? So I think it naturally maintained popular culture attention for 3-4 times as long as God of War. So I think like that's part of the reason why it was really impossible to move around. But I did see a lot of people, talking about camera angles and UI design and like the obtuseness of how the game works and all this stuff, which your mileage may vary on that, but if those people are going to vote and they have a game that is frankly more accessible in God of War Ragnarok than Elden Ring, I think so. It's like a weird thing where I think different segments are going to be voting on different things. If you had to call your shot now on these two, which one do you think?
Which one do I think is going to win?
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to do two different ones. If I was voting
Mhm.
right now, like if I was a voter, I'd 100% vote for Elden Ring.
Well, you can be a voter. You are an audience member.
Well, if I was like a real voter, if I had a
you
vote that counted, I would vote
have
for
you have a
Elden Ring.
you have a tenth of a vote.
Yes, I would vote for Elden Ring. I don't think Elden Ring's going to win. I think God of War is going to win. There's also a thing with Sony versus a company like from Software and Bandai Namco, where
Yeah,
I think the campaigning part of these types of shows really favors a company like Sony.
yeah. I think this is indicative in, for example, the Ben Stiller Travolta LeBron commercial
Yeah,
that we saw coming out about this, right? Like they have a different presence here. And I do think, like many other awards shows, there is sort of an internal cultural bias where like things from the place where the awards are held tend to have an edge, unfortunately. You know.
yeah.
Okay, so if I had to call my shot, I would also say God of War Ragnarok.
It's just the
Again,
most like
it is made to win an award season.
it is trying. It is the most. Let's make games into a movie, and this award show is most about let's reward games as art based on art being movies. And
Yeah,
if that is the metric that we believe in is underpinning this award show, God of War Ragnarok should win. It is
yeah,
doing that the best. Is that where we want to be? Personally, no, not for me, but you know, I don't think it's also like it's not a terrible place to be either. And should God of War Ragnarok win that award? Yeah, and that's what I kind of think Game of the Year is here.
yeah. Let's. Do you want to move on to the next category?
Hell yeah, I do.
Okay, we can start speeding up because I think a lot of these other categories are going to flow from the first one.
Because
I think that's
most of
going to
them
be the
have the same nominees.
yeah. So we can talk about best game direction, which is sort of like best director at the Academy Awards, which is really about like the creative vision around the game. So nominees: Elden Ring, Ragnarok, Horizon, Stray, and another game, Immortality. Um, I think game direction and best game tend to often mirror each other. I don't think we've reached a point like movies where the signature of the auteur can be uh, sort of cordoned off from the movie itself. Like you can say, like, this is a good looking movie, but the script isn't that great.
Yeah,
I think in terms of game direction, we still like our idea of it and how people vote is a bit more diffuse. For that same reason, I think if I think of creative vision, you end up with Ragnarok and Elden Ring. And I think like Ragnarok is a more directed game. Even though I think Elden Ring's world design is exceptional as well, I think is a much more undirected game. And it's a game that's meant to get you to explore it yourself.
yeah.
And because people's experience can be stonewalled and frustrating and very difficult, and a lot of people gave up, whereas like Ragnarok directs you a lot more to experience the core story. I think that's where the games have an edge.
I agree. I think it's going to be the same situation, even though that's probably not what I would pick. But yeah,
Yeah. Um, Category 3, best narrative. Outstanding storytelling and narrative development in a video game. Horizon, Ragnarok, Elden Ring, Plague Tale, Immortality.
I think God of War Ragnarok is going to win this one too.
Same same reason, except that instead of talking about like the game being directed, I think Elden Ring's story is a lot in the items. It's a lot in the lore.
Well,
There are some events,
this
but
is all the Soulsborne franchise games. I think Plague Tale Requiem could actually get this as like it's nominated so many times, and if it's going to get one, it's probably going to get narrative because
yeah,
that is most of what that game trades on, like in terms of its
yeah,
identity. And it seems if it's nominated so many times that it would be recognized as a winner in at least one of these. But I mean, the same is true for Elden Ring to some degree. But I don't think it would be here, even though I I am a huge fan of the narrative design of Elden Ring, where a few voice lines from characters, from bosses that are memorable, that even if you play them out of sequence, tell you something, and you build the blocks yourself in whatever order you go through the game. That's the kind of storytelling that works for me the best. That's the
right.
narrative that I'm here for in a
Well,
game.
Here's my feel about that is like imagine how we feel when we have to like look for a quest line. Now imagine people are other people who aren't like as into these games as we are. Like
No.
who are people who come to these games unconvinced and like they're met with like a kind of confrontational game structure for the narrative.
Yeah, no, I think it's fairly impossible for Elden Ring to win best narrative.
Like in a lot of ways, and there are some categories that I think Elden Ring will take that we'll get to. I think Elden Ring is almost built to be anathema to award seasons. Like it's kind of I was gonna say it's kind of like a Guillermo del Toro movie, but he did win for the Fishman movie.
I would say it's a very painterly game. It's like hanging in a
Yeah,
wall in a museum, like in an art gallery. It's not.
yeah. Um, I guess we can move on. So we're on a three streak for Ragnarok here. We're predicting like kind of a small sweep at least.
Yeah.
Art direction. Um, so art direction is actually interesting. Outstanding creative and or technical achievement in artistic design and animation. This one's really hard because there are actually like best art direction is actually two categories mixed. One is like the artistic design, and the other one's the animation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Horizon and God of War are sort of cannibalizing each other here in terms of animation
Yeah.
because they're both very beautiful games. I think Ragnarok is probably like there's more cutscenes. The mocap is extremely detailed. And I think animation will also lose a bit to Stray, where like we can talk about like the cat animations and stuff. I think in terms of artistic design, there's also Scorn on this list. Scorn is like a body horror H.R. Geiger first person game. I think that game is sort of nominated as a nod, but it's one of those like unvotable games. Like no one will actually like choose this, I think. And
I
I
think
think Elden Ring might actually take it.
I this is where I think Elden Ring is going to take it. I think one of the fundamental things of Elden Ring is like the Erd tree on the horizon from all the different angles you get to see it from is all the really remarkable boss designs in this. Like the environmental sublime that the art produces in Elden Ring is so beyond
Right.
most other games, certainly the ones on this list. It's not to say they're not good, but like damn, that shit was special. Like
Yeah.
I
Um
I hope it wins for this at least because it's the game I've taken the most screenshots of.
yeah. We're actually moving into your categories because your ear is so much more trained than mine. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. We have two audio categories back to back. So one is score and music, and one's audio design. So
Mm-hmm.
score and music, um, outstanding use music inclusive of score, original song, and/or licensed soundtrack. Plague Tale, Elden Ring, Ragnarok, Metal Hellsinger, which is sort of that's the rhythm doom style game that features an enormous amount of heavy metal performances by people like Serge Tankian
I think it
and
should win.
Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
I think Metal
Uh,
Hellsinger should win.
you think so?
I do. I think metal is criminally underrated across the board in our culture.
So
I think
you think
this.
it should win,
I do.
but do you think it will win?
Mm,
Because I tend to agree with you. This seems like this game is built around the music fully. Like that is the conceit of this game
yeah,
is
and it's
to
received well. I mean, the music is some of it like really cheesy metal, sure. Is all of it kind of write these songs specifically for this game, and so these aren't maybe the most emotional productions ever made. Sure, is it
yeah.
as a conceit really cool, and does it drive a well received game along in a really neat way, and like it worked, like they succeeded, it isn't garbage? Yeah, I think you should probably award that as an endeavor, although there's a how many artists are working on this thing who you actually give that award to,
Yeah.
but like it probably does have the best score in music because it's doing something fully unique, and it's so meshed in with the identity of that game. Chronicles 3 I haven't really heard God of War
It's
Ragnarok. I mean, I I enjoyed the music in these two games for what they were, for Ragnarok and Elden Ring. They didn't like. There's nothing out of these two that's really sticking with
yeah.
me. The only other thing I would say is like give it to Bear McCreary for doing the Black Sails theme song like 6 years ago. You know, that's
So
fine.
I think it's actually like a good time to think back on the 2018 Game Awards where God of War 1 was present and they won for Game of the Year and Best Direction. But they lost narrative, best score, and best audio design that they were nominated in. They lost all three to Red Dead Redemption 2. So the awards back then seemed to favor orchestral composition and sort of ambient world design in all three. So I actually think Plague Tale might get it
Yeah,
as sort of a more narrative-oriented, atmospheric game.
yeah, this is one of those things where like I would have had to play through all of Plague Tale and I didn't. There just wasn't the time, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know in that situation, but like I don't think Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok are strong contenders.
No, they're a bit. They're good, and Bear McCreary's score is fantastic on this, and the Elden Ring score is also amazing. I, I'm with you that I think like this is one of the categories where like they're likely to bend the knee and give it to somebody else a little bit. Do you
Mm.
want to talk about audio design in tandem with this? So audio design is not music; it's just game sound, right? It's for stuff like if you're a fan listening to this, like it can be car sounds, gun sounds, weapon clangs, um, like the sound of metal and stuff like that. So the this is an interesting situation because God of War, Elden Ring are in, but then Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is in, Gran Turismo 7, and Horizon Forbidden West.
Yeah, it could go in any way here, really.
It could go in any way. My sense is actually probably this is where Horizon breaks in a little bit for all of the audio design for the machines and like the ambient world and all the animal sounds. I don't see like car sounds or gun sounds being what the jury votes for as like
Oh, I could
innovative
definitely
design.
see that. I disagree. I think this is an element of these games that are really, hyped up, and especially since, there are developers voting as well, and there are a bunch of Call of Duty fans, and Call of Duty is only in one spot here. I think it'd be like I really love these bullets. I could totally see that.
Okay. I mean, again, you're way more of an expert on audio than I am. So my
Oh
sense is
man, I think if you play with a good headset with an amazing soundstage, good car sounds in Gran Turismo 7, or like, wow, the bullets feel so real, is a very like it's not the way I approach my games, but it is a thing. And I could definitely
right.
see them taking this over. And I've heard a lot of good things about Modern Warfare 2 as a from a sound perspective as well. Like it's been popping up.
Oh,
So
interesting. Okay, well,
I think it could actually be like, oh, finally it feels as immersive as it used to, and sound is part of the reason.
right. Okay, so there's I think one more category that I want to do as like a big one, and then we
Yeah.
can kind of rapid fire through these next categories and just say what we think is going to win instead of listing all of them, or people
Yeah,
are going to be here for
sounds good.
2 years.
Yeah.
The last I think of the like I want to talk about the big seven categories is best performance, and
Right.
this is like best actor actress, right? Uh, is there really any competition in these? Ashley Burch for Horizon Forbidden West, Charlotte McBurney for Plague Tale, Christopher Judge for God of War, Kratos, Manon Gage for Immortality, and Sunny Suliak for Atreus in God of War Ragnarok. And I would want to preface this by saying Christopher Judge didn't get it for God of War 2018 because he lost to the voice actor playing the main character in Red Dead Redemption 2. So there is a legacy factor of
No, he's gonna get it for sure.
I just think Christopher Judge is
Ashley
like
Birch is
running
amazing
away.
though. Like,
I mean, all these performances are fantastic. I just think this is one of those like he didn't get it back then. I think he I think he's less the dominant performance in Ragnarok than he was in 2018.
He's good though.
Yeah, and I think there are some key scenes in this game where I think he gets a chance to shine as an actor, which I think could sway the votes. I just think it's his to lose. Is sort of where I'm at with this.
Yeah, no, he's gonna get it.
All right, so there are a couple more categories, so we can do one of two things, which is we can either sort of parachute in and talk about a couple
I think
categories,
we
or
do
we
it
can
that
just
way.
like
Yeah.
we do it that way. So I'm gonna skip games for impact. I want to talk about best ongoing game for a second,
Mm-hmm.
because we're so surrounded by service games right now, and the games that are up for nomination are Apex, Destiny 2, Final Fantasy 14, Fortnite, and Genshin Impact. This is an interesting situation because I think this is also going to be like sort of a legitimizing brand on what we think is a good kind of service game.
Yeah.
My sense is that 14 wins this because its reputation is pretty pristine as like an ongoing game.
For some of the political reasons that go into this, I think Destiny 2 wins it.
Really.
Yep.
I mean, this will be interesting. I Destiny right now is in the worst like player retention moment it's had since I think the Rise of the Osiris expansion, which is like early in D2.
Yeah, no, Destiny
A
2
really
suffered a
bad
crash.
moment.
It crashed.
But it has been riding high for a very long time. 14 is more niche, but it is so beloved by MMO players. I just don't know how much MMO players account for in terms of the broader population anymore. Apex, for that matter, I really don't have a good sense of how
I
many
think it's
people
still
are
really
on Apex.
popular.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. So we got 14 and Destiny 2 from you. I suppose we'll see
Yeah.
where that lands
Although,
next.
hey, Respawn Entertainment, make me a live service Titanfall game, and I'll vote for you every year. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is my TED Talk.
I think we can skip not because I don't want to talk about these, but just for time constraints. Best independent, best mobile, best community support, best
Sure.
AR VR.
Yeah.
I think these are all important categories. I just want that to be clear to people. Innovation for inaccessibility. Quite frankly, I just don't feel qualified to judge this.
Yeah, I haven't played enough of these, although I do think I want to say, like, in terms of God of War Ragnarok, so I have a photosensitivity issue and a motion sickness issue when I play games.
Yeah.
And I am frequently disappointed that I have to get games on Steam and refund them just because there are certain light patterns that I can't play. And God of War Ragnarok, early on, the camera made me fucking sick, but it was because they give you like an accessibility option before you play to turn stuff down and to tweak things very specifically. Like it was great. I was really surprised by a game of this budget that typically I would associate with not giving a shit because it's going to have enough players anyway. Like it doesn't care about the few of us who are who are going to
Yeah.
feel sick. But it's like here it's a huge range of camera sway that you can change in this game, and I found for me the accessibility settings to be incredible, and I think partly
Yeah.
because of its visibility as a game and how much they
Yeah.
did, even though I'm sure it's imperfect, and depending on what kind of accessibility options you need, you're always going to see the ones that are missing, right? And that's always what happens with me. As soon as I have the ones that I need, I'm like, I'm good, because now I can play it, and that's what I really wanted to do. And I really appreciate that they're setting a precedent for a game of this size to be like, all of this should be here.
Yeah. It is, I think, kind of poised for that. I can't speak to the other ones, but in terms of you're right, combination of the game's reputation, its size, all of this stuff, I think it's
Yeah.
in that boat. There are two more things I want to talk about. So
Yep.
I'm gonna skip action game again, probably a really big category, but I think the division between best action adventure and best role playing game is really interesting. They effectively have split up Elden Ring from God of War, which I think is going to end up being
That's to
how
give
these.
it the W.
I think this is how. I think this is. It's kind of like when a movie wins best international feature instead of best movie,
Yeah.
which is I think best action adventure will probably go to best God of War Ragnarok, and best role playing game will go to Elden Ring. There are like I'm really interested in why like Elden Ring is considered an RPG, but God of War Ragnarok isn't. I have a sense of it, but it is one of those things where I'm not going to say it's category fraud, but it is like arbitrarily drawing a line between the two in a way where other role playing games that are in this category, like Live Alive and Triangle Strategy and Xenoblade, are much more traditional RPGs to my thinking
Yeah, for sure.
than Elden Ring. And I think it really is just to separate the two.
Well, I think
Um,
there's a case for you start the game with a unique character with a different stat distribution depending on what you pick. And on that
mm.
alone, it avoids the category fraud. Like I think it's a strong enough argument if that is where you're situating the role playingness and like, you know, point dumping versus Ragnarok's effectively completely meaningless skill trees.
It's a bit more on rails. I'll agree with that.
Yeah. So I
Um,
get it.
so in terms of games, the last category also that I think mentions merits a small mention from us is best fighting game. I think Multiversus is probably going to run away with this for this
Yeah, it's
year.
probably going to win, even though I think it had its moment and has kind of gone.
I think
That was a
it's faded
solid couple
away.
weeks.
Yeah, and I think the other games in this aren't like they're all a bit more niche. Three of them are Japanese fighting games. None
Sifu
of
could
them
win.
are. Sifu could, but I think Sifu, if it does win anywhere, it'll actually maybe win an independent game over. I would say, if it were to win anywhere, it would be independent game. But I think independent game is just going to go to Cult of the Lamb.
Yeah, for sure.
So like that game is 100% running away with
Yeah.
the indie game. The last thing, I mean, we can like before we close out the episode, best adaptation. So we opened this by talking about how like the show is very I think is trying to position itself to appeal to the film slash TV Golden Globes Academy Award kind of thing, and so they're talking about video game adaptations in other media, and it's actually kind of surprising because Sonic the Hedgehog 2 made crazy amounts of money. Like it was the box office leader for a really long time this year.
Yeah.
Uncharted is a terrible movie critically, but also pulled, I think, like a $500 million box office revenue. The Cuphead show, I think, there are some discussions around Fleischer animation that we're not going to get into
I don't
here.
even
That makes
understand how this got made, to be honest. Like I get it, but like seriously.
it's a tough sell to a voting body, I think. And then the other two that are left over that I think I know which one of these two is probably the winner.
Oh no, there's a
Cyberpunk
clear
Edge
winner
Run.
here.
Yeah, so Cyberpunk Edge Runners, really well received, strong Cyberpunk adaptation, animated by Studio Trigger, same people who make Gurren Lagann and Kill la Kill
And,
and Promare and all
and
this stuff.
reboosted interest in Cyberpunk the game. Like
Yeah, and like people were making characters from the anime inside of the game
yeah.
and stuff like that. So like by all intents and purposes, a very good adaptation. I don't think any of these products can compete with Arcane.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
You go into a video game adaptation with extremely low standards. Arcane presents something that is just good by any metric,
yeah.
and it's
It
going to win this. Like
yeah, the critical reception, the audience reception, the other game crossovers of Arcane in those like Arcane in Fortnite, Arcane in Magic the Gathering, Arcane in Legends of Runeterra, like it's just everywhere, and people are poised to see the series continue, and that creates like a narrative for the show as well, for like the awards show to then come back and reintersect with that in 2024, which is I think when the next season is supposed to come
yeah.
out. Um so yeah.
I'd
I
like to
mean,
take one moment to
Please.
talk briefly about the best esports game category.
We should talk about this. I'm sorry if I like glossed over it.
No, no, this is fine. Who's up? Valorant from Riot, Rocket League from Psyonix, League of Legends from Riot, Dota 2 from Valve, and Counter Strike Global Offensive from Valve. And the only reason I really want to get into this category is I actually don't care who wins, but this year every Dota fan lost. And so there may not be a clear winner here, but there is certainly a clear loser. And I would like to use this platform just to say, dear Valve, please give a shit again about your esports scene. I think
Feels like they really just didn't do much.
the tournament was rough. The time of year when you're hosting, like, international used to be during the summer, and it's such a good time for it. And in the fall, it is not good. I'm as someone who really wishes to continue enjoying Dota because of all the sunk cost fallacy, all the time I've put into this game.
Yeah.
Please do a bit better on this front, because it really seems like you don't care as much as you should about it.
Yeah.
Or maybe you shouldn't. You know more about your company than me. All this to say, good luck to all the other 4 competitors in the category. You deserve it.
Yeah. So I think my final note is I do expect God of War to take the lion's share. Not because it's the better game, but I think because it's a much more easy to vote for a game.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of it's built for this kind of circuit, and it appeals to the kind of people that get to vote on these things. And it's easy. It's an uncomplicated win for a lot of folks. And I think Elden Ring and to a lesser extent Horizon will also get some wins out of this. Which, I do feel like a second season of Horizon kind of just like if it had come out in 2017 and 2021, I think they would have had like a much easier time of competing
Yeah.
in those ecosystems than in this. Which is to say, like, actually, despite a lot of other media struggling, 2022 was kind of a banner year for video games. Like, we got a lot of good content from February to now.
I loved this year for games. I really did.
It's been a while, right? We've had a couple years where
Yeah.
both of us have been a bit, on standby. I don't want to say dejected, but just kind of like, yeah, things are fine.
No, dejected is fine. I think that's accurate. but this year I've enjoyed most of the things I've put in my eyeballs.
All right. I guess that's it for us. And so next week, the plan, because we are recording around the time of the awards, ostensibly, because I think if I'm not mistaken, they start at 12 p.m. EST. We're probably going to be doing a reaction show. So it's probably going to be a post-awards show if time works out, or that's the plan. So tune in to see how wrong we were in our predictions. And yeah, I suppose that's it, right?
That is it. We'll see you next time on CTG Weekly.
Bye.